Okay, so good evening and welcome to the FASD Hub Wednesday webinar. My name is Jo Garofalo. I'm an FASD Hub advisor for the Hub in Scotland, but I live in Surrey in the UK. I'm supported this evening by the FASD project lead, Barbara Ogston. So I just want to say welcome to everybody. Firstly, I guess I want to make sure that everybody is comfortable with Zoom. So you're comfortable with the toolbar at the bottom and the chat and the Q&A buttons. So Barbara is on hand all evening to manage that. So if you've got any questions or concerns or things that you need or things that you require, then please just pop those in the chat or in the Q&A. And we will be able to filter through questions to our guests this evening and hopefully be able to answer things. And I'm sure that Barbara will step in if needed. So I think, first of all, I would just like to say our theme for this month, being FASD month, from the Hub in Scotland is FASD Hear Me, which is absolutely perfect tonight because we have two amazing guests who are going to talk to you and you're going to listen to them, and so you're going to hear them. So I'm delighted to welcome our guests for this evening, Jan Griffin and her wonderful son Rossi. Jan is a birth mum with an absolute wealth of experience, a huge advocate, an inspiration to me personally, and Rossi, well, what can I say about Rossi? He is a unique and amazing young man who I first met many years ago and had no idea he had FASD, and reconnected a couple of years ago, and they've been inspirational in my life and my daughter's life. So welcome, guys.
Thank you very much for asking us to join you in FASD Awareness Month. It's quite exciting.
It is really exciting. So tonight, guys, we don't have any PowerPoint presentations, don't have anything like that, because that's not Rossi and Jan's thing. They like to chat. So let's start, I think, by I think I'll ask Jan first to just introduce herself. I know Jan, and I know she will say, oh, I think everybody's bored of hearing what I say. But I say to her all the time, our community is continually growing. We are continually having more families looking for diagnosis or receiving diagnosis. And so they need inspirational people to help them travel and walk that journey. So I always say to her, your story never gets boring because there are always new people. So I'm just going to say to Jan, can you tell us, really probably just introduce yourself and tell us about your introduction to FASD and how you found yourself in the position that you are now?
I found myself in the position I am in now by coming through the front door and through that door, and then I sat down. I came to the FASD world. It was a slow journey. Rossi was born very underweight. When he was 12, I had collected numerous labels, and they were all in my rucksack, and I used to hand out each different label to each person who I thought might understand. You're good with autism, you're good with ADHD. None of them fitted. None of those labels actually worked for Rossi. So I plugged in one day every label that I'd gathered through the 12 years of him being different or naughty or he did it yesterday. And I put all of these things into the computer, which were getting better and better at that point. And up popped a thing called Surrey and Borders NHS FASD Clinic. And I thought, oh, I've not heard of that. And I started reading about a young man, I believe called Andrew. And I was reading all about this little lad that was just basically a pain in the backside to everybody, and his mother wouldn't do as he's told. And in actual fact, he was adopted. It was because he had FASD. And it told you all about what happened in FASD, an overview. And it was at that point, it was as if somebody had actually handed me a piece of a jigsaw, and all of the jigsaw was there, apart from this one little piece that I'd been searching for forever. And it was like, it just worked. It was absolutely the correct thing. And this is the bit that I feel everybody's bored with, but the actual recognition and the realization and knowing, full stop, there was no other diagnosis I needed because I'd read it, I'd seen it. It was as if somebody had taken a brick, chucked it as hard as they could from behind the computer, hit the glass on the inside bit, and it all smashed. And all of those little shards of glass were hitting me and cutting me, and so painful, thinking, oh my Lord, that's what he's got. But exactly at the same time, this kind of double-edged sword, it was that the glass had gone, so therefore there was this really clear view. It was like the contrast went up, and I knew what I had to do, and I knew how I had to help him. And that's how I came to it. And from that point on, I started searching. I rang up the clinic and I asked for an appointment. They said that we had to have the genetics. I asked why. They were super helpful. And they said, you have to count out any other genetic issues before we can do the test to see if it is FASD and whether, I was admitting to drinking alcohol during pregnancy. But I didn't know that I was pregnant until I was around 4 months. It's still not absolute as to how far I was, because at that point in my life, I was 40 years old. I'd already gone through a very early menopause at 36, and I was told that I could no longer have children. So I was just living a 40-year-old life, having a bottle of wine at the weekend, with barbecues with friends, maybe going out to the pub in the evening during the week. I was never a big drinker. Have a couple of pints of lager or whatever it was I had. And so it never crossed my mind. Never heard of it, never thought about it.
So what was your first reaction when you actually spoke to somebody and had a diagnosis confirmed?
Well, I didn't particularly have a reaction because I went to Raja Mukherjee's clinic in Surrey. And I didn't really have a reaction because I knew, I'd read it, and I knew because every tick on those brain domains and things, how FASD affects people, young people living with FASD, every single one of them were ticked. So there was no reaction to the doctor telling me that my son had alcohol-related neurodevelopmental disorder, which it was back then before the language changed. It was a case of me saying I did drink, and having that conversation, and it wasn't something that I felt absolutely dreadful about. I felt dreadful that the alcohol had caused brain damage to my son. I didn't feel dreadful saying that I did because I didn't know. So I didn't really have to deal with that. I felt awful and I felt super guilty. I wish, hindsight's wonderful and I wish it had been different. But in my day, it wasn't a thing, hadn't been heard of, less than now. My doctor even said, because I was stressed out, I couldn't believe that having gone through the change that I could have kids. So he suggested that I either have sleeping tablets, which I was horrified at, because you don't take tablets when you're pregnant, or to have a tot of brandy. And I opted for the tot of brandy because I thought it's safer.
And that's the really terrifying thing, isn't it, that you as a pregnant woman were given advice or given suggestions to help ease what was already quite a not stressful situation, but a shock to you.
It was stressful because I'd got children who were so much older.
Yeah. And then it's like, okay, well, I'm not having any tablets. And so you do that just thinking, okay, maybe that will just help me relax and help me sleep and help may not be so.
It didn't last. I mean, it was about 3 or 4 days because it's quite disgusting, Brandy. But you know, there were other things. I nearly split up from Rossi's dad because of the cat, because of toxoplasmosis. It's like, oh, you've got to get rid of the cat. You know? Seriously.
But it's like we knew all about that then. So you knew about cats and you knew about soft cheese and you knew about all these other things. But and I mean, hopefully nowadays it's starting to get better, but I still think there's probably a long way to go in terms of the amount of GPs that there are.
Yes, and the lack of knowledge. But I mean, it's getting through. Thankfully, the path ahead for the people following on has a light on it now, rather than being a very stumbly dark road. So it is out there. But
so can I ask you, what age did you actually get the diagnosis for Rossi?
he was 12 eventually. Might have been a bit older, 13, somewhere in that, about 12 or 13.
So I guess that's probably around the time that I first met you both. Probably
That's
around.
what he would have been in the
Maybe
yeah,
13.
he was, because it was just secondary school, up until secondary school.
And so I find it very interesting now, you know, all these years later, I end up being an adoptive mum with a child with FASD, and we reconnect, and then we find out quite bizarrely that actually years ago Rossi came and did a show with me at Voice a Million, and he was a youngster, and I was thinking, because obviously with my situation, I'd adopted a child with medical reports with evidence of prenatal alcohol exposure, but no education on it. So nothing in my sort of training. And I'm thinking, I'm sure I didn't know. I'm sure I'd never heard of FASD. And I remember talking to you and you saying, I don't think I told you that. I think I just said you had ADHD. Yeah. And I just think that's a point for me where I just want to address that and say to you, was that the fact that you thought people didn't understand, didn't know, or?
I think there was two things there. One, I used to lecture you, didn't I, before we went in? It was like, basically handcuffed him and said, you do as you're told, or and you will learn your lines and you will do all this. And it was a very, very strict regime I had with him, scaffolding, but he loved singing and he was really good at it. So it was something I directed him into, but kept really rigid boundaries. Never gave him too many sweets and things like this, because I wanted him to focus and I wanted him to fit in. I want him to enjoy and things like that. And I didn't I told people he was autistic because people had got the memo on autism. So therefore they gave a little bit of leeway to somebody with behavioural issues connected with autism, because they kind of know. And his ability at singing did the rest, in my view. And the reason I didn't say about his FASD is, one, I didn't think anybody would know what it is, and secondly, I didn't want anybody judging. There's a huge issue, there was definitely, not so much now, of judging what people perceive as somebody that has a child with FASD if they knew what it was. And I don't think they perceive a birth mother as somebody like me. So
no,
they would attach their own thought processes, and I don't blame them, because I too imagine somebody that's got an alcohol problem or a drug problem and things like that, and which there are many, but that's exactly the same thing stands for those people who have that issue. As to me, no mother sets out to harm the child ever.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's the alcohol that harms the child, not the actual mother. She's got a problem. I didn't know. All of these different reasons. And so this is probably the reason I didn't really go into it.
So when faced with the diagnosis, did you share that diagnosis with Rossi straight away? Did you what was your initial sort of response in terms of were you making plans? Did you think about what was going to be the future? Did you think about telling Rossi when you told him?
Yeah, kind of all of the above.
It was very open.
Yeah, there was never a discussion.
Yeah.
It was just the same as Rossi is gay, just the same as he's not very good at maths, just the same as we have baked beans on potatoes on a Wednesday. It's FASD. What's that? Well, because I drank when I was pregnant, it's caused the neurons in your brain not to migrate across to the places that they're meant to go to. So the alcohol's actually stopped that from happening, and that makes sense as to why your amygdala's worn and things like this. So we would just talk about that, and he'd go, oh, he was so like, you know.
I would literally be making videos. I remember once making a Facebook video of me being like vlogging. I was like, "Hi guys, I'm just at a doctor's appointment right now," and this was when I got my diagnosis. And we were in this big London office. In like
Tavistock, wasn't it?
Yeah, somewhere in London, big, massive windows. And I was like, guys, look at the windows, they're huge.
That was St George's, I remember.
Anyway, so it just shows we were very open as a family.
It wasn't an issue, it wasn't a thing.
Yeah.
Rossi, do you remember like the day you actually knew? Do you remember that day, or do you just?
It was just my life. It just happened, and I didn't think about it. I never really thought about it. Really, it was just did happen, and I moved on.
And it's not a part of your life that you go, okay, well that was the day.
There's no starting date on it. Let's say that it was no like specific day that I was like, I've got FASD. It's like never that.
Do you think that's something that is part of you now? I've got FASD.
Yeah, I think since starting, I remember when we did VM last year, I think it started to sink in more because we had done the documentary kind of filming before a few months prior, and I started to realise, I'd been doing stuff with a friend called Rachel about FASD, teens with FASD, and bringing that forward to my generation, our generation, the kids with FASD. And I started to really think, okay, this is actually a really good selling point, and to tell other people about FASD in a different way. So then we did the filming, and then we did VM, which was an amazing success, with my very fabulous elongated speech.
It was amazing.
And it just to see everyone's reactions, that's when I started to really think, oh yeah, I should be
there was a bit where
more
you
proud about
wanted
it.
to push it away, wasn't there?
Yeah, a few years back I was like going through my like angsty teen phase. I was like, I'm not got any disabilities, no problems with me, I can do everything. And still I have those moments, but you know, back then I was more like, I've got no problems, I want to be like everyone else. But now I'm just like, this is me, and there's no point in trying to change it. You've got to work with what you have
and celebrate what you have.
And
celebrate all your
abilities, not the disability.
Exactly. That's what you always say to me, Jan. Find the brilliance.
Hashtag find their brilliant.
And it's so true, isn't it? It's so true that we see so much with the right scaffolding and support that there is brilliance. But I do think Rossi particularly has just like blossomed in the last sort of year.
If it wasn't for Janet Griffin, I wouldn't be here today.
Clearly, clearly.
So Rossi, could I ask you if you could maybe share with us for the audience that are here tonight? I think it would be really interesting to know, because I'm sure, I don't know everybody who's here or what their situation is, but I know a lot of people come to the webinars who've got younger children. And I know for me, I've learned a lot from you and your mum, and my daughter's only 12. And I think it would be really interesting to hear what you feel are the difficulties that you face sort of daily within your life, but what your strengths are. And also, if this is not too many questions, how you have interventions to help, or if you do, or if that's mum.
So strengths and how it affects me and how it affects others.
Hmm.
I'll do that first.
Yeah.
And
Then
then
you're
I'll
gonna have to
go on
repeat
to
the next one.
interventions.
Yes.
So I think I always say it's a blessing and a curse. FASD isn't this terrible life sentence. Yes, you live with it, but it's not imprisonment. You can live with it, live alongside it, and learn how to nurture it into something beneficial for yourself
Mhm.
and your family. I think my strengths, because of my FASD, because of the parts of my brain that are less developed, is my creativity, my singing, my makeup. So my family would have always been creative. We've always been in the film industry and the art industry, the theatre industry. We've been in every bloody pot, fingers in every jar. And I feel like get your family to nurture that and really sit your kids down and be like, what do you love about yourself? What do you love to do? Or if you notice that your kids love to do coding on the computer or gaming, get them a gaming set, just something specifically for them, because starting it young really helped me. I started makeup when I was 12 and I've been doing it.
Younger, darling, you were.
I know,
7.
but like properly, I started when I was 12, 13
Yeah.
and going to proper lessons. Send them to, if they love music, send them to piano lessons and guitar lessons and cello lessons and singing lessons, and send them to groups. I think VM was quite a big thing for me when I was younger because it was the first time I was with other creatives who were like singing. I always went to Stagecoach and stuff like that, and I went to Saturday school, and that's how my mum really made me blossom. You're gonna go to Saturday school, and that was just how it was, and I really loved it. But for the effects on other family members and intervention wise, there's always, and there will always be interventions in my life because I know that's how FASD works. And I know that there are stages in my life where I have mini breakdowns, and that is how I learn big lessons. So recently with work, I learned a major lesson.
Let's go on positive.
But
you were headhunted
yes,
for...
okay, listen. Headhunted for a job, great. All fabulous, got the job. But there is also major things with FASD that come into the workplace that people don't talk about. And again, you have an intervention with the people that you love and the people who care with you and care for you and want the best for you. And you realise, okay, let's really reevaluate what's going on. And you'll always have those.
So what happened in work? That's what you were heading to.
I won't divulge into specifics.
Not that, but what did you decide to do?
But I wrote down everything that I thought I could improve on and how that would help my other colleagues. And the past 2 days have been my best 2 days. And just to finish it off, if you're younger and you're struggling with, I don't know, school or college, or there's certain things that you don't like, write them down, take little notes, do a diary, reflect on your days, highlight the things that were brilliant and some of the things that were terrible, because then you get to notice, I always say a pattern. There's a pattern with FASD. Everyone's life has a pattern, a circle of the same behaviours. And if you start to note them down young and realise, then it will help you in the future.
So could I ask you, one of the many, many questions that we get asked, and many of the things that families worry about are maths and time, money and time and money management. Could I just ask you now, as like a 20-year-old, how that is for you?
It's absolutely terrible. Listen, I get paid every month, and every month within a week all my money goes, and it's because of my budgeting, lack thereof.
Abstract.
It's the abstract thinking and the no coincidence.
Impulsivity, abstract thought,
Everything that just comes
living
along with
in the
it,
now.
especially living in the now. Don't think, oh, my child will get to 16 and
Miraculously.
they will be brilliant at all of this all of a sudden. It's not going to happen. You're going to have to sit them down. And we've learned, go and find someone in Soul if you find it difficult to socialise. OT if you find it difficult to deal with. So Soul is social speech and language therapy, and OT is occupational therapy, which is budgeting and life skills, and also a bit of socializing. So really get them young and start.
And that's
early.
really interesting, I think, for the audience tonight, because occupational therapy very often, if you're parenting younger children, doesn't sort of address that area, but it should really, shouldn't it? So if we
think with the parents, whether they're foster, adoptive or birth, now that the parents have the knowledge is the power. That doesn't mean that the OT knows about FASD or the person from SALT. So what you have to do is what I did, and I would suggest that people do it, is write down like a bullet pointed how your child works and what's good for them, and tell that OT. And we've had a few, and the ones that just didn't get said, yes, I know about FASD, I've been a psychiatrist for a very long time.
They have to be open to learning about it. That's a big thing about
then
FASD.
We haven't carried on with that person. We've moved on because they fully expect Rossi, and they're like a machine going brrr, and I can see Rossi's eyes going like this after the first 3 sentences. And I thought, this isn't going to work, but he will nod going, yes, I'm fine, because that's what they do.
Anyway, back to me.
Oh.
So what I'm thinking is just get them. I know people say like therapy is quite a big word for young kids, but especially when it comes to OT, if they have problems with budgeting, especially, even like little card games, something like money related. I used to love Monopoly when I was a kid. Play Monopoly with them, but make it, I don't know, bills related. Like you're renting a house and you need this amount and you get paid this amount. Find like a fun interactive way, because everyone with FASD learns interactive.
But equally, it isn't just a case of playing Monopoly and it all gets better. It's
repeat. Yes, but it's also a different way of learning how to do it.
Can I just ask this question? We've just had a question come up in the Q&A from somebody called Ashley, who said, I have a client who is 16 and is adopted, and we think she has FASD, but local CAMHS service do not think a diagnosis is necessary.
Of course they do.
Why could I ask why you think now, like as a mum of a 20-year-old and as a 20-year-old, why do you think a diagnosis is so necessary?
The reason is because the majority of people up to now who haven't really got all of the ins and outs of FASD see that autism and the crossover of the 428 comorbid diagnoses that go along with FASD, they are clued up on autism. They are able to help people with ADHD. They can have talking therapy. None of the above work for people with FASD. And it's having the strength, I suppose. I used to feel so kind of rude telling a doctor that actually you're wrong. And it was really super difficult, which is why it's taken so long for me, one, to be able to do that, to be able to say, actually no, or to write down this thing and say, there you go, this is FASD, and I send it to anybody that works with him. And the reason that it is important that whoever that person is goes back to CAMHS or their CCG or whatever it is now, or the doctor, and say it really, and it's in the nice guidelines to boot, and say, no, it is super important, because FASD is organic brain damage, and therefore the support that's needed is different to that of somebody with autism or ADHD. And those areas need to be addressed, not the areas that they fit into the autism diagnosis. Hugely different.
Yeah. So diagnosis is vital, really.
Huge. If you don't get the diagnosis of FASD or any alcohol related problem, then your child is going to be bundled in with the rest of the spectrum, and the interventions are not going to work for them.
No.
And they'll continue, and then you'll end up getting the secondary behaviours and all the rest of it, which you don't want. But you as a parent know, so that's the big start.
Yeah. So could I ask, in terms of parenting Rossi now as an adult, what would you say to families in terms of the progression from child to adulthood, and the how the parenting changes? How much time do you still have to put in and oversee things in comparison to neurotypical brain?
I think it's an ongoing thing. With FASD, you have this global delay, and it's along with the abstract thinking, along with the impulsivity. So you're working as a child. When Rossi was younger than 16, it was pretty simple, because I was boss. I was, no, this is what you do and this is how you do it, and if I say jump, you say how high, and all that sort of stuff that we as parents do. As they get to 16, they push for more freedom. I was really truly lucky with Rossi, because he was so happy making videos and being in front of the computer or singing, and he was in stage school, so he'd already got into his tribe. But other young men, particularly, or young girls who get to 16, they want their own freedom because their friends are doing it, so why can't I? And when Rossi was asking to do those things, rarely, but when he did, I would go, yes, okay, you can, but this is what time it starts, this is when you come home. And if I got the why, well, that's not fair, and I'm like, well, life isn't fair. You've got brain damage, you've got impulsivity, you've got this, that, and the other, and I would just keep reinforcing the reasons why I had to be there to support him. We called it an outside brain.
Still do,
but not everybody likes that term, but that's our term, and he needs that outside brain to refocus. And as he's got older, we still have the global delay, and he'll have an issue. Sorry, talking about you in the third person.
No, I'm very used to it.
He'll, at the moment, I'm really pleased, because really Rossi is in the region of probably 16, along with the 25-year-old ability, along with the 20-year-old chronological. He's running around about 16, and sometimes about 7. Depending on the situation and the fight or flight. So it's ongoing, but I've always said, and we always really cling on to the fact that he's globally catching up.
Yeah.
So he's now 16, and in my life, I'm like, yes, that means he's kind of safe, because most 16-year-olds are able to find their way home. Yeah, they do some blooming silly things, but
there's progression, isn't there?
I think
that's I mean, I have a 16-year-old who's just started college, who's adopted but doesn't have any diagnoses, and I mean, he obviously has trauma and attachment, so that whole process this week of getting a train and a bus an hour and a half from our house, that is just a thing with him. So and he's just classed really as neurotypical 16, but definitely not neurotypical, but definitely classed like that. So I think if that's where the majority of the functioning is going, that gives people like definite an incentive to parent in a way with scaffolding and support. And I thought it was really interesting that you mentioned about your outside brain, because I used to hear that all the time: outside brain, external brain. And then I heard, oh no, you can't say that anymore. It's got to be scaffolding and support. But sometimes I just think what works for you guys, or what works for families, and how, and also how you relay that to your child is, when you've got younger children, sometimes, you know, you need support and scaffolding. It might not be as easy when they've got FASDs to say, well, you know, let's just use mummy's brain for that bit. That's your little bit of brain that helps. You know, I don't know. You know, I don't
We've
think
always
there's
done it.
experts.
Yeah, we've always done that
Yeah.
in our home, and at the same time, it's been particularly recently. That's actually super annoying. Just saying. He had his phone. Is we've started having the conversations of the global differences in his brain. It's his brain after all, you know. So helping, talking about how the brain works, how it doesn't work. Obviously, when the child is younger, it's a bit more difficult, but we still had those conversations. We would say, look, you know, that part of your brain isn't working. This part of your brain is. So you've got to find a way to get that information across in an artistic way, whichever way works. And that's how we've always done it. And now getting Rossi to go, oh, okay, the 7-year-old Rossi has come out. And now me, as a 20-year-old Rossi or 16-year-old Rossi, has to go to 7. He's got to do this, not me. He has to do it in his own head. And he can visualise little Rossi and then go to little Rossi and say, hey, that's okay. This is what we do now. And it's an internal dialogue he has with himself. That takes years of
practice and telling.
Yes.
And reinforcing. It's quite funny because somebody's just put in the chat that they'd never heard that term before, but quite like outside brain. So I think it's like,
you drew a picture once of it, didn't you?
I did.
there we go, Rossi. But then you're the person with the diagnosis. So I think it's, you know, yes, there is changes in language and what is appropriate to say for everybody, but sometimes it's really good to hear from the actual person who has the diagnosis, not just their parents. So do you find outside brain an okay term?
Yeah, it used to really annoy me.
Did it?
I used to be like, bugger off. I haven't got no brain. Because when I was in the Brit school, I would have like multiple different PAs. It took years for me to find
Personal assistant, in case.
Yeah. And realistically, they weren't actually a PA. They were an LSA, but assigned to me. So they would help me in AEN and in classes, 30 hours a week. Never got the 30 hours, but anyway. It took years to find that specific person. And they'd always be like, I'm your outside brain, I'm your outside brain. And I'd be like, I have a brain. I don't need an outside brain. But again, just like Mum said earlier, repetition. The more it was said, the more it was normalised. So I'm saying, start it young, get them used to the idea, and it will work out. Because now, me and Julia, who is my LSA, love that woman to bits. She's my mother at college, I say. She was my mother at college. And Elle, who was my mother at college in school, in performing arts school. So start it really young and like get the term comfortable, because you will at some point need to be like, okay, you need to be like,
it's whatever term fits. I mean, that was our term.
Yeah.
Find your own one.
Okay, so Rossi, this is a perfect time for you to share your journey of school to college to the amazing life you're having now, and just what successes you've had and what you've achieved with the right support, because I think that is, like, for me particularly, just aside from doing the webinar, has been the biggest inspiration for me as a mum of a 12-year-old who, you know, and like if she ends up like you when she's 20, I'll be sitting here going, thank you very much.
Stop! I'm a God, carry on.
So
Um,
just tell us about school and when the transition happened to the stage school, and where you are now, in your own words, in your own time.
so I started at a primary school called Hinchley Wood, which wasn't the best. It's a great school for neurotypical people and for queer people and for gay people and private school people and posh people, and I love it for all of them, and I love it for people who live in my area. But for me, it just wasn't the best because they didn't understand, especially at the time when I was studying there in primary, they didn't understand how to cope with a person with AEN needs. And that is completely fine, and they've probably gotten 10 times better. And I moved from that school to Barbara Speak, which sadly, Barbara Speak is no longer with us as a school. But it was an amazing experience because I had the best time there and I learned so many amazing lessons and made so many great friends. And I was able to like really hone in on my creativity. And it was a I got a scholarship. It was a private performing arts, so it was very small lessons, really good for my specific FASD and learning. So I would have again a one-to-one who would be with me, L, and I was able to learn so much quicker and better, and I got really good results from there, which without the help of mum and my assistant, I wouldn't have been able to do that. So that was that part. And then after that, I moved to the Brit School, and I was there for 5 years and had lots of lessons there as well, and lots of PAs, and also kind of found out, oh, I like something called PA, which is production arts, which is behind the stage instead of performing on stage. So I'd go behind stage and do makeup and costume. And then now I call it uni, but mum's always like, it's not uni because you're not and holes and blah blah. I'm at Brushstrokes Makeup Academy at Longcross Studios, which is owned by Netflix. So I'm taught day in, day out how to do makeup and hair for film and TV. And yeah, it's just, this is what I'm meant to do. And we finally got to the point where it's like, okay, we are where we need to be. And there's still lessons that I'm learning to this day. And then most recently, I got offered a job at Charlotte Tilbury, and I work in the Kingston store. So if you're ever in Kingston, come and say hi on a Saturday. And I'm still even learning now what it means to have FASD in the workplace and how it affects me and how my work colleagues need to know certain things and how they say we understand, but it's difficult for them to understand because they've never had experience. Even though they say, oh, I know people with autism, it's a completely different ball game, as everyone knows. And as a person with FASD, you have to be accepting of that. You have to be like, okay, this is how it's going to be for the rest of my life. And I have to be able to be an example to teach other people, because that way, when someone else with FASD comes in and works for them, that person will have a 10 times better experience. Not that I'm not having a great experience at Charlotte Tilbs. I do love that job. It's my favourite by far I've ever had.
So what would you say, Ross? So when you say the impact of your FASD in your work placement now, so it's a Saturday job in a shop. So when you say that's why my work colleagues need to know, what do they need to know when you're going to work? What is it important?
They need to know my counting skills are lackluster. They need to know that I am very scatterbrained when I'm stressed. They need to know that I need 5-minute breaks at least twice a day. Otherwise, I'll be tired and I'll be lethargic and won't be able to work. And they need to know that to remind me to drink water, which it sounds, in the grand scheme of things, in like adulthood, I'm 20, like, what? You need to be reminded to drink water. It's like, realistically, with FASD,
Particularly coming across as you are as well.
people don't. I find a lot of times kids with FASD don't tend to do things that their body needs. So, won't go to the toilet, or they won't drink water, or they won't eat, because we're so busy in our minds thinking about how to socialize with someone and how to deal with a person, that all of our energy is going into that, and we don't have the brain capacity. It's just simple. We don't have the space to think, I've got a human body on me. I need to actually sustain it. So to have other people, your work colleagues, your manager. I have the most amazing manager. Her name's Zoe, and she's been so accepting with everything. And
So you're helping teach her as well.
and
aren't you?
it's all about, okay, so this didn't work out, Rossi. We're going to write up this meeting and teach you how to be better. Okay, Rossi, this didn't work. This is your second write up. You know, you go up to 3 and it has to go higher. And it's about learning that, okay, FASD affects the workplace. And
But that at that point, you see, as a mother,
this is where
parent,
mum's like,
this
that's
is
not
where-
fair. That
yeah.
not fair.
It-
And I have to be like, it's not just about the fairness, it's also about the fact that they've never dealt with someone who has FASD. So they need to learn.
and that's where it
Maybe
becomes a teamwork.
2 warnings and 3 warnings isn't enough warnings. We need to add more
And-
warnings.
Yeah, and also, do they have like a disability procedure?
Yes, they do. And when at this stage, when a young person gets a job, I mean, it's almost guaranteed that they're going to forget. They're going to get something wrong. They're not going to be able to speak up for themselves because it will be rabbit in headlight. Okay, and they'll agree to absolutely everything and go, "Oh dear, I'm bad, I'm bad," which is sadly because that, as Rossi just so succinctly put, doesn't have the brain capacity to be able to do that. So that's where helicopter parent comes in. And I'm proud of being a helicopter parent. You know, I really take on board what Rossi wants and doesn't want me to do. And I step back and we agree the PA role that I take on. We are looking for a PA for him. That isn't me. That would be super. But find a PA that's aware of FASD is not going to happen in the near future. Which is an absolute necessity for people with FASD. So that is where I go in and say, well, actually, hold on a second. That first warning should not have been a warning because nowhere in the paperwork, which he won't read, and you know he won't read it, does it say that. And so that has to be addressed. Rossi won't address it because he's already forgotten. He comes out of work whistling rather than devastated. I mean, I'm still carrying it for 3 weeks afterwards. His whistling in his bedroom, singing.
We have an argument. 5 minutes later, I'm up in my room singing Adele, Someone Like You. I love it. I live for it. I'm like, you know what? That was 5 minutes ago. Now is now.
He doesn't even think that. It just is what it is.
Can I
Something
just
downstairs.
can I just ask a question? So somebody's just put, and I think this is like a really interesting one. Does Rossi have issues with peer relationships?
True.
He seems very sociable, but peer relationships can be an issue for my 11-year-old who has very low self-esteem and can appear aggressive and competitive with his peers. Now, I know I can talk about my 12-year-old daughter's relationship with you, but you answer that question.
Well, it depends.
11, go back to 11
Okay,
years
right.
old.
At 11, wasn't social. I was gay, didn't know what it meant to be gay, had FASD, and at that time didn't know I had FASD, and all I knew was I had autism and was very loud.
And the rest of the world.
And the rest of the world was the one at fault, and I was the normal person. So I was very, again, people thought I had anger issues. A lot of, this was when I was in Hinchley Wood, people would say, oh, he's just anger issues, or he doesn't listen, or he's lazy, or doesn't care and doesn't respect authority. A lot of people in my life have said he doesn't respect authority, but it's not that. It's
A defense
it's
mechanism.
defending my feelings against how
People
I
actually-
think people are seeing the actions, because I can't explain why I'm acting that way. Relationship wise, I didn't have any friends when I was 11. The only friend I had was Gabby, my best friend, who lives in Norfolk, and I moved to London when I was 7. So we, drifted apart for many years. We still were our best friends, and I'm going to see her next week, and I'm very excited. So
But
it's
regarding what the
like relationship wise, throughout my life, I've had a rocky. It's not just, I may look sociable and I may look like I have my head screwed on right, but I've had to learn so many lessons, especially in Salt. Salt was really impactful for me growing up in Brit. I learned how to deal with political arguments. There were, especially with the economy now, we don't want to offend anyone regarding race. So any jokes, any, I don't know, queries, questions that I would genuinely have about someone else's life experience as, say, a black person, I would ask a genuine question because I didn't understand, and I'd be really interested. And it's learning how to phrase a question so it doesn't offend the other person, and that applies for not just race but everything in someone's life. So the political views, their relationship views, their gender views, and the way they dress and the way they look. I had to learn how not to speak about appearance, and that it's never acceptable, and just lots of social
But at 11 years
things.
old, jumping in there to answer that person's question, at 11, it was a daily falling out, and the following day, oh, they're my best friend. And the next day, they're falling out, and then they're their best friend again. And it was then became my job to try and guide Rossi to not speak to that person ever again, because they're actually really horrible, and did it in a nice way. And Rossi did a lot of masking. So what I had to do is I would look at the people that he was trying to be friends with, and I would have to think, oh, I'd recognise which of those children were good for him and were able to understand his complexities, and then I would encourage that friendship. And so there was Jazz. There was a couple of people I thought, oh, okay, let's go for them. And 9 times out of 10, actually, they were the ones with autism or another of the labels. And so that's how I had to sort of direct him, because they do a massive load of masking at school. And it is, I used to watch him, and it would literally be, I don't care.
And this is also going towards the masking, and Caroline, how you said, this is my daughter down to a T with friends and her masking. When you mask as a person with FASD, it can either come across one of 2 ways: bitchy or just blatant rudeness. And I feel like the learning about it younger, I wish I had those lessons when I was young. The benefits they would have had on me as a social person. I mean, again, I'd have a major fallout, someone would bully me, and the next day I'd come in and be like, when are we going shopping? I just wouldn't, just genuinely wouldn't think. And you know what, is what it is. And you just have to
I
learn.
think especially the people who are putting a lot of the comments have got children sort of 11, 12 type of age, which I think is like they've got their hormones kicking in. And I mean, I've got a 12-year-old who had a friend round today, and honestly, I've never seen her behave anything like it in my life. She was just like, oh, like this. All right, mum. And it was like, where is that coming from?
Do you know what though, Jo? That's actually not necessarily just the hormones. That's just FASD growth, and they're actually just doing what everybody else is doing and what's on Instagram, and doing the look, and that's it's just the way. And Rossi still does it. It's just like, whoa. But
But
like,
Rossi, what I would say is like, so I know you in this environment, but also within like a rehearsal environment. So we've worked together for the last year and seen each other each month, and you've come into rehearsals of like 30 or 40 people of mixed ages.
Yeah.
And yet still I would, as a person looking in, as a parent with a child with FASD who is younger than you, I would still say you've got your safe space within an environment where there are a lot of people you don't know. Like, I was very aware in my rehearsal that you would need space, or you would need to be with certain people, and that just to expose you and expect you to do 8 or 9 hours was not going to be conducive to our day or to you. Would you agree?
I would agree. And knowing that you had some connection, as we know each other in a professional and personal environment, it shows through the way we work. So a kid with FASD, a young adult with FASD are two different ball games. A kid with FASD deals with noise and traction around them by being loud or disruptive. A young adult, if they've had the right, shaping and molding and teaching, support, exactly, scaffolding, outer brain, will know, okay, I need 10-minute break. I need to like go outside, have a vape, take a second, and like breathe.
Yeah.
And that might, include their phone. It includes my phone because I can't, it's something to distract me. They need a distraction.
The distraction. So, but again, it all comes down to where they're at globally. So they can talk the talk, but they can't walk the walk a lot of the time until the global progression catches up. So at 16 chronologically, Rossi wasn't capable of going, I need 10 minutes, because his brain didn't have the capacity to first of all think it, sort it out, and then do something about it.
I was too busy thinking on how to socialize and be the most popular, because my brain was still at
and
11,
there was a question
12.
about being over, falling out with people and then forgiving them like that and then being best friends again. It was just like, whoa, not I think the word is discernment.
My 11-year-old is so forgiving. She doesn't see it, and sadly prone to being bullied and taken advantage of. Yeah, I was exactly the same. And
I think that is a thing, and it's the repeating.
Yeah, it's kind of like wishful thinking. I used to be like, oh, okay, so that happened yesterday, but today's a new day.
So
and it's not, and it's nothing from yesterday is going to go into, and it really does show the way the pathways work in the head and the global delay, because you'd think maybe like a 6-year-old would think like that, because they don't have the mental capacity to think.
They don't hold on to
okay, that's actually chronologically what you do yesterday goes on to tomorrow. So yeah, you don't think about it.
A 4-year-old would go to nursery, a 3-year-old would go to nursery. Rossi would go to nursery. He'd have his tutu, he'd have a sink with water, happy as Larry, have a fight about the tutu, big upset. Next day, forgotten. Every young infant is like that, because they aren't laying down memories. They're learning to breathe, learning to grow. All their energy is going into and it's the same with an 11-year-old, a 10-year-old, 7-year-old, where they are on that spectrum globally, as to how soon it will be before they start discerning, like, hold on a minute, that person's been mean to me 3 times, and mum's right or dad's right, I should maybe keep away from them.
Yeah.
But they can be manipulated. They're very vulnerable, but they do learn. I promise you, they do get there.
Yeah, they do. Look at you, Rossi. Amazing. So we obviously had some questions submitted before the webinar, so I'd like to try and get some of those in. We'll keep our eye on the chat as well, but we did have people submit questions before. So I guess the first one is for Jan. So, my son masks at school. Do you have any advice on how to get school to see that it's not just him being oversensitive?
Yes. You write down what FASD is. You write down what I did for Rossi, and I can't promise that we're going to have to stop doing that. That agitates me. I can't promise that they're going to listen, but being a helicopter parent isn't so bad. But what I did was I wrote down in very simple terms, in Rossi's words as well as mine, we wrote it together, how to help me be the best me in your class with FASD. And it was bullet pointed. If you're asking me a question, please ask me only one. If you're doing this, you know, and there's a list of what worked for Rossi. And I would give that in, and people go, oh, thank you very much. And then they probably didn't read it.
Put it in a drawer.
And off we went, and we got into trouble for exactly the same things. At which point I could go, have you read that? Oh, well, you know. And so it was again that moving along and educating them and explaining to them, ask for a meeting and say, I really need a meeting, and sit down, and here's FASD. It's super difficult to understand, but it is brain damage, so you have to take that on board. Your child is probably not into this at all, and they're like, oh my god, you know, but leave the child out of it. You go with that diagnosis and the information on FASD, and you ask for a meeting with the school and keep pushing it, because, and if they don't listen, then you can quite rightly keep them off school for a day, and they go, oh, you might get a fine. You say, fine, code of practice says this, you are not doing what you need to do.
Send that fine, sis.
Yeah.
Send it.
Because it doesn't matter about everything else. Your child is the most important thing, and they need to fly along with everybody else. And so they have to put things in place.
Yeah.
And understanding, actually, really, really, I think what clicked for me with Rossi was when I was able to jump out of my brain and go into his and understand why he was masking. Instead of saying, don't do this, 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 I actually suddenly recognise, it was through Jeff Noble actually, I thought, oh right, hold on a minute, the team starts here, me, I'm his teammate, and therefore I've got to have his back, and he needs to know that I've got his back, and so no matter what he does, then I've got his back. If he's wrong, he knows I'll tell him, but if the school is wrong, he also knows that I'll tell them, and that is so important, which meant he could be free. Does that make sense?
Mm.
So that's what I would say to that person.
Fabulous. Thank you so much. Okay, so for Rossi, this question is, what would be your advice to a young person in their teens who is adjusting to having received their diagnosis?
I'd say find a group of people who have the same diagnosis, or follow Teens with FASD on Instagram. And
which you're not doing anything for, so don't send them there.
Try and find people, look for what you looked for. Look for things that you can understand. So writing poems, like, what is the thing you found online? A news article. The article. Find articles, read about it, and ask the doctors about it. I wish I asked the doctors about it instead of learning it from my mum.
But maybe not booting it out of the park. Sit with it. Don't boot the diagnosis out of the park and take it on board.
A me question.
It is.
But so, like, Rossi, you took part in the documentary we released last year. So there's you in that, and there's other teenagers in that. And do you think for you, like, you've taken part in it, so reflecting now as an adult, if you watched it, do you think that type of documentary would be useful for a teen, or do you think they may go, I don't want to know?
I think it's very technical, and it what? I thought she said. Anyway, I think it's a technical documentary, and it's got a lot of information in it. And even I didn't watch the full thing. Sorry, I'm sorry.
But you watched yourself.
I did watch myself and my mum and Dr. Raj.
And Dr. Raj.
And
So you need another documentary of just teams. That's what you need.
well, when you get the diagnosis, I had a very lucky kind of experience because I had already had experiences with autism diagnosis, always being in the hospital for epilepsy. So I was in and out of a hospital constantly. So I was used to that environment.
Yeah.
Whereas if you're not used to it and you're going through your teenhood without realizing, okay, there's an actual reason why I'm struggling, I feel like the experience is completely different.
Yeah. And I just think like having a 12-year-old going on 13-year-old, I definitely don't think that for her just watching a program about it would be good. I've found for me particularly, I found like for her the best thing was meeting you.
Yeah, talking to other people with FASD, because then you can relate yourself to that person and be like, oh, okay, so I'm not weird and I'm not crazy, and this is actually a thing because there's another person that exists who has the exact same thing as me.
And the super, super, super interesting thing about, in this scenario, Lissy and Rossi, is they've both got FASD. Rossi relates to Lissy, Lissy relates to Rossi. They're vastly different in ages, 8 years. So somebody who's 20 who can get along with somebody who's 12 or 11 when he met her, that could be construed as a little bit odd. But that 11-year-old and that 19-year-old, they fit because FASD doesn't have an age difference. And so they can communicate in their FASD world. Outside world might think, gosh, that's odd. But they fit and they understand without really having to say anything.
Yeah, and I found like, you know, I suppose anybody else would say, oh, why is your daughter friends with a 20-year-old?
Yes.
You can sit and
The girls who know, the girls who get it, and the girls that don't.
What I know she does is she talks about things that she finds hard, and she will say to me afterwards, yeah, well, see, Rossi said this was happening for him.
Because
And I think that's because she's now not 10, she's now 12 going on 13. So I think in answer to that question that was for you, I think it is about finding that the community that is similar to them.
Find their tribe.
Yeah. Another question was, we're reaching diagnosis after a year of information and evidence gathering. What support do you think there is out there for parents and a 10-year-old child facing FASD?
Is that to me or Rossi?
Well, I think to you, Jan.
Okay. What support? At the moment, sadly, there isn't a vast amount because it's only just gone into the NICE guidelines, so we can all now go, well, actually, it is medically recognised. Now what has to happen is there's some years ahead of us where people have to be trained in FASD, just like I always kind of relate it to the film Rain Man back then.
You too.
It was Rain Man that allowed autism to find its place and get the support that it needed. And that took a decade overall to train people up. And the same is going to happen for FASD.
So what we need is a Netflix show.
That's what we need. We need to go to Shepperton Studio.
Yeah, we need to go to where I study and we need to be like, listen, we've got an idea.
So I would, the answer really is, you are the main support. You now have to tell people surrounding that child or that person with FASD what FASD is and how they can help that person with their FASD. And it's going out and getting the help, SALT, OT, knowing what FASD fully is, and also 1,000,000% knowing the code of practice. It's my Bible. The code of practice in education, learn it, and take each paragraph 6.1.2, and in every communication you put, oh, in 6.1.2 it says you should do this. And that's where you're going to get the support. Because if you don't know that, and if you don't know your rights and what your child is allowed to have, then obviously with financial things and the rest of it, with education, councils, etc., they're going to wriggle away from doing anything.
Brilliant. And then I guess this one's a question for both of you. Do you think that independent living is going to be an option and the way forward in the future?
Later, my point of view,
Yeah.
In a few years' time, when people are trained up in FASD.
Is this for us personally or for?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Oh, for you. At the moment, they don't know enough about FASD to be able to keep Rossi safe in a situation where he's impulsive. He's getting safe.
And also personally, the situation that we're in wouldn't necessarily, we wouldn't benefit from it, I don't think, because we work. Okay, whatever. I want this bloody house. That's what I want. So I don't think in the situation personally that we're in, because I'm learning to be more independent slowly but surely, and I've got an end goal of being able to own the house and being able to support my family.
Stick me in a home.
Yeah, send you off to a boot camp.
I'm looking forward to it. No, I think with I've often said to Rossi, you need to go and find somewhere else to live. It happens. We're not the sort of, yay, look at them, aren't
We're
they
a perfect
fantastic?
family.
Yeah.
We never have arguments.
We clearly do. And the times I say you need to go and find somewhere else to live because I'm at the end of my tether.
Go and live with your father.
But sadly, at the moment, Rossi wouldn't be supported in supported living because he's so eloquent.
He would almost like trick them, like unintentionally. They would let the guard down. And if I did live in independent living, I'm sure if I didn't have FASD and I had a different learning difficulty, I'd be very well catered. But FASD is such a wild beastie that...
Rossi, that's so funny because I parent a child with FASD. I know you and I know your mum, and twice recently I have texted you and not followed up with your mum, and then thought, and then spoke to your mum. She's like, don't forget FASD. And that's because I work with you when we're singing and we're doing shows and you're suddenly
neurotypical
and we're talking, and then I'm like, and I do that as an FASD advisor, as a parent of a child, and I forget because
I forget.
We're just like,
you forget. I forget.
Who are you?
I forget.
It is. I do as well, and it is so. I am constantly berating myself, but I do go to Rossi afterwards, and I go, "Look, I hate that this happens. I stop pushing my buttons." And then I think, oh, he doesn't know he's pushing my buttons, but he's pushing them, and so it is really, really tricky. Sometimes he does, he does it on purpose. I know he does, but I forget, and so I have to take a step back.
So we are getting towards sort of the end of the webinar. So I'd just like to ask Rossi really about his involvement with the single that we're releasing on September the 9th. So the FASD Hub and Adoption UK teamed up with Voice a Million to create a single that we're using to launch a project. So it's just the launch is September the 9th, which is when the first version of the single will be released. And our aim is to basically put together a choir of individuals with FASD or any other neurodevelopmental disability to learn this song and perform at Wembley Arena on the stage at our Voice a Million concerts in 2023. And Rossi was there, giving it his all with his solo featured section. So I'd just like to ask you what that experience has been like, and why do you think this single potentially may make a difference?
Well, the whole experience has been lovely because I've been able to get to know Lissy more personally, and been able to relate with her and teach her things, and show her parts of my life and me as a person, and how that helps her, and watching her, the difference it makes in her personal life is really rewarding for me. Being able to work with you and, you know, all the producers, all the talent, all the kids also in the
Recording.
voice, the choir was a lot of fun because you're able to kind of be on center stage and be like singing. I think it's going to make a difference because nothing out there is like it. And
How did you feel when we went to the studio and you were working with James Hawkins, who did like the Captain Tom and Michael Ball and the Military Wives, and then Darren Day's there recording, and it's like, come on, Rossi, centre
to
stage.
be honest, I didn't really care. And that's now it's nothing personal. I don't care if you were the Queen, I would be on my knees. Okay, different thing. But I think because I've grown up with celebrity names thrown into the family because of the family that I live in and the jobs that my families work on, I've been raised to not really care. So it didn't, I think it was a good thing that it didn't bother me.
But the experience in the studio.
The experience in the studio was sick. To be able to hear myself in the headphones, I was like, oh my God, I'm Mariah Carey. I was like, literally felt so fabulous. I was like, this is the best it's meant to be. And I think it's going to make a really big impact because they're going to be able to hear kids with FASD and be like, oh, okay, so that's actually a human being and it's not just
letters.
Yeah, letters in a note about
kids?
disabilities.
Yeah.
They're going to be like, oh, that's actually like a human who has feelings, who kind of moat words to a track.
Who isn't this proverbial
pain
disabled
in the
pain in the ass? Well, that goes without saying, but is not this proverbial disabled person. They all, as you said earlier, have something amazing, and all the people that you get in the choir that's going to back it, I mean, they've all got FASD or a disability of sorts. I mean, wow. Let's,
Yeah.
get a flag out and go, look,
Let your freak flag fly. Woo! As you can see, guys, my FASD means I'm about to shut up. But no, honestly, the single is going to be so beneficial, not just for people who are neurodivergent, but also for,
letting the world realise that people with FASD are amazing.
Yeah.
And I think that's like that is the whole aim, isn't it? So for people tonight who are on here, they can go to the Adoption UK website now and they can download the track and they can get their children to record their voices.
Yes, please do. We would love it.
Their voices to us, because the whole idea is we'll release it on the 9th of September. We'll launch this project and then we'll get as many voices as we can, and we'll just keep building this track.
To Wembley, amazing.
To Wembley in 2023.
Ooh.
But yeah, no, it is absolutely. Yeah. And on top of it, apart from the fact that all of those kids suddenly find that they are amazing, that gives them confidence, and then they can move forward with their confidence in that area, which will then spill over into other areas because they found that they're not rubbish. They're bloody amazing. And on top of that, the rest of the world is going to hear it, and more people would have heard FASD and understand what it is, and they will look into it, and so the snowball keeps going.
And that's the thing, isn't it? If we can, I think what is probably really key, and I think what I've learned is that don't concentrate on the things they can't do. Really find what they can do and scaffold them with that, because then they will definitely succeed. So I'm going to take a quick look at the chat again, because we're getting towards the end. My son is age is listening and looking forward to meeting Rossi and Lissy and wants to come to Wembley. God bless.
So that's excited me. I'm very excited.
Wishes for your career, Rossi.
Oh, look, my son is listening looking
Yeah, I
forward to
know.
meeting Rossi.
Somebody said, can we get a little unplugged preview, Rossi?
Oh, go
What
on.
does that? No, I don't know the lyrics. I
line?
couldn't possibly.
Tell him the lyrics and he can do it.
If I cannot sleep and there's nothing left.
No, I'm not doing it.
Go on, don't be bored.
No, guys, you've got to wait until the 9th. Now, this is what we call.
But there is, Barbara can probably put in the chat a link to the promo.
Yes.
Because it is a bit on the spot at like nearly 9:30 to say, after you've done an hour and a half.
It's going to go away going, oh, I wish I had. But that's FASD.
So before we finish, could I ask each of you, what is your one wish for everybody to know about FASD? What was the one thing that you would like everybody to know, and what is the one thing that you would like to change?
Him.
One thing, one thing you'd like.
Excuse me.
You would say her. The one thing that I would change, did you say?
One wish and one change.
The one change I would obviously, well, I don't know that I would now, because if I hadn't have drunk when he was pregnant, when I was pregnant, would his creativity in the other side of his brain taken over so much, and would he have been the same? So I don't know that I'd change that, but obviously I kind of would.
I think everyone would, to be fair.
And the one thing I would tell everybody with a child with FASD, stick with it and just be strong and don't give in to the child or the young person. Keep that scaffolding, whether it's summer holidays, Christmas, whatever. That scaffolding is so important. Even now at 20, I went away for 1.5 days and I had 75 messages going, Mommy, I miss you. Mommy, when are you coming back? And so the scaffolding has to be there. And that's how to be a helicopter parent. Yes, that's my say.
And over
Coming back to me, one thing I would change. I change the stigma. It's not a death sentence. It's not even like a sentence. Like it's a comma in your sentence of life, baby. And it's something you've got to live with and get used to it.
And hashtag find their brilliant.
Yeah. Thanks. I love
that's
it.
That's what I said on the Jeff Noble promo. Find their brilliant. So I'd just like to say thank you to you both for joining us this evening. It's been truly wonderful to have you here. I'm just going to take the little respite of the time that we have to talk about FASD month, which obviously everybody knows September is FASD month, and September the 9th is the release date of our single You Are My Song. You can go to Adoption UK website to download that song. If you would like to get involved with that song, or you would like your young people to get involved, or families, you can go there now and download a track and record voices and
some video as well. Hey,
yeah. The video, we've got a great video to go with it, which will also be released on the 9th. We've got many more activities as well. So if you go onto our website and you go to the FASD month activities, you can design your own t-shirt and you can write an acrostic poem. Our message is definitely FASD Hear Me. If you want to follow us on any of our social media, please retweet. That would be amazing. The website is fasdhub.scot, and there's lots more on there. There's lots more resources. So it's not just about this month, but if you want to go on to the website, you can download. We have a huge amount of fact sheets, which are really beneficial. There are blogs, there are podcasts, there are resources. If you need to get in touch with the hub and you need support, we have a helpline that you can call. We have lots of advisors and supporters who many have lived experience. There's just a whole host of things. So please feel free to go to www.fasdhub.scot. Use the hashtag FASD Hear Me. Download the song on September the 9th. Join in and add your voice if you can. And just join me to say a very big thank you very much to Jan Griffin and Rossi. It's been amazing. You've been incredible. Thank you very much. If there's anything you'd like to say before we go, please feel free.
Who? Us?
Yes, you.
Oh, well, thanks for listening and joining in. It's great, actually. I did put it in the chat box there. It's so lovely when people actually join in on the chat box and ask the questions, and because then it feels like we are in it together.
Yeah, it does, because you have the questions printed off, but it's been really nice because the questions that have come up have meant really we didn't, we've sort of covered a lot more than I thought.
Yeah, we've covered so much ground, and the fact is that whether it's really come out there that whether the person with FASD, living with FASD, is 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 or 20, they're the same.
Yeah.
At all ages, but they do learn, they do grow, and they will be fantastic members of society. And there's no reason why they shouldn't be. Catch it early,
Absolutely.
support them, bang. No need for any doubt or disappointments.
Absolutely. Thank you very much, guys. Thank you, everybody. Take care. FSD, see me, tweet, reshare, join our single, and join us again at our next webinar.
Okay. Bye. We're going. Thank you.